Welcome to Lesson 2. This lesson spans 2 weeks, and this presentation will be the first of 2 presentations for Lesson 2. It will deal primarily with e-communication, whereas the next presentation will deal primarily with business letters and memos. The activities related to the letters and memos presentation will be due next week. First, please make sure that you read Chapter 3 in your textbook. You will also need to read Chapter 4 about methods of communication, but that will be discussed in the letters and memos presentation. If you've read Chapter 3 and done that, we're ready to go. Most of you probably took one or more communication classes earlier in your college career. You may have talked about oral communication, small group communication, and even written communication. Now you're devoting an entire semester to professional communication. That tells you how important good communication skills are to your professional life. There are many different methods of written communication used in professional settings, and your book talked about several of them. On one hand, there are electronic methods, including blogs, IM, social media, and of course, and most commonly, email. On the other hand, there are more traditional methods of written and professional communication, like letters and memos. First, we'll talk about electronic communication. There are plenty of different ways to communicate electronically, and sometimes it's hard to know what method to use for what purpose. When in doubt, fall back on what we talked about as the most important concept to keep in mind while writing professionally back in Chapter 1, audience. Once you know who your audience is, figure out your purpose. If you look at these two aspects of what you're trying to convey, they together should give you a good idea of what kind of communication to send. For example, when sending a longer, somewhat formal message to perhaps a manager or a group of coworkers, consider sending an email with an attachment. And if you know the person you're communicating with pretty well and just need to send him or her some brief information, you could send an IM if they are in your office or a text if they are out. A word about instant messaging. In the early 2000s, IM was the way to communicate. It was quick and it was instantaneous. When smartphones became more popular, however, instant messaging for social reasons became less popular in favor of texting. However, many businesses still use instant messaging as a means of communication within offices. Some of you may have even had this experience with co-op jobs or summer internships. Other forms of e-communication. There are blog posts, tweets, social media posts like Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. But many times, in most bigger companies, those kinds of communication will be written by a social media coordinator and won't be something you'll need to worry about crafting. If you're particularly interested in learning about this kind of communication and how to write them, make sure you read the section in Chapter 3 that deals with them. One thing I will say about blogs and social media is that their use can really help or hurt a company's image. Effective use of Twitter and Instagram accounts can really help build a brand image that can go beyond just a website. Companies that use Twitter and engage with their customers use social media as an opportunity to reach people on a more personal level and possibly build some brand loyalty. The same idea goes for blogs. Good company blogs that really present good, well-written, and useful information can also help a company's image. By encouraging reader feedback, they can build an image much like the good use of Twitter or Instagram. One point to remember about electronic communication is that it becomes a legal record. If you write something in an email, it's awful hard to take it back or deny it. It's also hard to control where it may go after it leaves your computer. Who can forget all the hubbub from just a few months ago about Hillary Clinton's email problems? Just make sure your work emails are all professional and appropriate. Your company could look at them at any time. And speaking of email, I've noticed that a lot of you put in your goal discussions that you wanted to learn more about good email practice. I completely applaud that desire. I can't tell you how annoying it is to get less than professional email from students. I think email etiquette is always a good idea. So here are a few quick tips to use when writing email. There are also more in the book that you should review. Even though it's email, still use salutations and closings. Break your thoughts into paragraphs. Don't just write one long, rambly message. Paragraph breaks will organize your thoughts and make the message easier to read. Always use correct punctuation, grammar, spelling, and the like. Try to keep your message short. The longer the email, the less likelihood that your reader will get through the whole thing. Use specific and relevant subject lines. This will make your email easier to find later when your recipient is looking for it. And lastly, remember international English. Make sure if your email is going to anyone who may not be a native English speaker to use international English. We talked about this a little bit in the last lesson. One funny example of not keeping international English in mind is when my husband sent an email to an international colleague right before Thanksgiving and told her he was looking forward to eating turkey. In her response, she told him to have a good trip to Turkey. Obviously, she didn't have our holiday as a point of reference and misunderstood his intention. One of my personal tips about writing good email, and one you won't find in the book, is that if you're writing an email of any importance, and really, aren't they all important, once you're done, read through it again. Even if you just read it looking for spelling mistakes or typos, you'll be amazed at how many times you'll find something that's incorrect or sounds wrong. I almost always reread my emails before I send them, and almost always find something to change. I also know there have been times I've been in a rush and not proofread, and of course ended up sending something embarrassing, a typo, or a grammar mistake. It only takes a minute or two, and your communication will look much more professional and careful. Here's a fun fact about the word email. Did you know both email with a hyphen and email without are acceptable spellings of the word? I found this factoid on Grammarist.com when I was trying to figure out which spelling was correct. Let's talk about what you need to do for this week. Engage in the first forum discussion. The forum discussion won't be due until Saturday, February 13th, to give you a little more time to engage with each other. I posted a separate document that talks about what you need to do in the forum. You also have a quiz due Friday, February 12th. All the same grading and rules apply to this quiz as the ones in the past. Lastly, this week we'll have our first series of online chats. The first one will be Monday night from 6 to 7, and the second one will be on Thursday from 6 to 7. You need to attend one of these sessions to get credit. For grading guidelines, please see the document chat details on the introduction lesson page. These are slightly different than what I posted at the beginning of the semester. I tried to modify them in your favor, so take a look. The details for next week will be in the business letters slide presentation. Thank you very much. These are the citations for this presentation.